Who knew doing nothing would be so complicated?
The government remains closed because Donald Trump and Republicans insist on raising Americans' health care premium.
At some point, reason, good sense, common sense has to take effect here.
While Congress is so dysfunctional it can't even keep the government open, President Trump is taking the chance to expand his power again. First and foremost, the military.
It's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look.
Notifying Congress of a new war determined rather than declared.
This is pursuant to his constitutional authority as commander-in-chief and the chief executive to conduct foreign relations.
And directing the military to use American cities as a training ground.
Got one warning only. Unlawful assembly.
This is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within. And we have to handle it before it gets out of control.
And that's before we even talk about a Trump-brokered peace deal between Israel and Hamas, Russia's new aggression, a $10 billion bailout for terror-stricken farmers, and wild races in Virginia and New Jersey. Some shutdown. Let's get into it all. With us today, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, Democrat of Illinois, and Congressman Mike Turner, Republican of Ohio. Can Congress figure out a way to do its job? And to decipher the political gibberish around Obamacare and health insurance, former Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin. All that and our best in the business panel of journalists. The Hill Sunday starts now. Hello from Washington and welcome to the Hill Sunday. I'm Chris Stirewalt. This is day 5 of the government shutdown triggered by Senate Democrats in a bid to reverse Medicaid cuts and extend Obamacare subsidies. But while there are informal negotiations taking place in the upper chamber, the House is in recess and not even scheduled to be back this week at all. That kind of makes sense because House Republicans will be waiting for instructions from President Trump, who so far is making a very convincing show of enjoying the freer hand the shutdown provides him. NewsNation's Joe Khalil joins us from the White House. Joe, what do we know?
Yeah, Chris, good morning. So it doesn't appear as there's any indication that either side is bending from their position, at least right now. And if we know if there's going to be any progress at all heading into week number 2 of shutdown, it's going to have to happen in the Senate because, as you mentioned, Speaker Johnson said we're recessing in the House all week, not bringing lawmakers back. And we also know that right now Republicans who met virtually yesterday with their leadership heard from their leadership that they are doubling down. They still feel they have the moral high ground in this argument. They're on the right side of the shutdown, they believe, because it is their version of a CR to reopen and fund the government that doesn't ask for anything else. It's the Democratic side that is asking for more. From the Democrats' perspective, they continue to argue this shutdown is about health care, and they're asking for guarantees now, demanding that Republicans work with them to extend those ACA subsidies that 20 million Americans rely on to help pay for their health insurance. Right now, what they're saying is they simply don't trust Republicans' word. Several people, including and up to Vice President Vance from the White House last week, said Republicans would be willing to work with Democrats on those subsidies, but the government needs to open first. I asked several Democrats why they won't take Republicans' word for it. This is what Senator Martin Heinrich from New Mexico told me about that.
That's like having a 4-year-old in preschool saying, we're going to eat the candy bar first, and then we'll negotiate about whether I eat my lunch and my sandwich. Like, this is the time.
So there is a trust deficit there in Congress that the Senate is going to have to work through. Chris, we know that open enrollment begins very soon. Democrats say that is another timeline for them. The Senate will pick this up tomorrow. We'll see votes. But again, there's no indication that the vote result will be anything other than what we saw last week, which was several failed votes to reopen the government.
But candy is so delicious. Joe Khalil, we thank you very much. Let's go now to Western Ohio. Let's talk to Congressman Mike Turner. He's a Republican from the Buckeye State. I want to ask you, so the Senate seems to be cooking up a deal that would maybe include the extension of those Obamacare subsidies. That's billions of dollars in order to reopen the government. That's something a lot of Republicans don't want to do, and they want to see those subsidies expire. Is that something you could support?
Well, Chris, I mean, this shutdown, as you know, as you were just reporting, is unrelated, really, to the healthcare debate that Schumer is proposing. The House has sent over to the Senate a clean continuing resolution. Now, Schumer has chosen to cause this pain, to shut down the government for this healthcare debate at this time. They don't have a plan. The bill that they put on the Senate floor actually was over $1 trillion of additional spending that failed in the Senate. Now, this debate about what is to occur in healthcare and these additional subsidies, as everybody has said, this does need to be addressed. And certainly it impacts my state. And there are portions of these subsidies that do need to continue. They do impact families. There are ways in which this does need to be addressed. And I think this is an important debate. People have made a commitment that it should go forward. But this is completely unrelated. The fact that they have shut the government down in this, unfortunately, shows that they don't have a plan. They have caused this precipice to occur. And we're not really certain exactly what they're going to do next.
Okay, we got to go to foreign policy because I got to pick your brain. You're on the Armed Services Committee and you're the former chairman of the Intel Committee. So the president is sending Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to put the finishing touches on a peace deal for Israel and Hamas. There seems to be a lot of progress here, but there's always the chance that Hamas is just playing for time. That has worked pretty well for Russia in keeping the United States at bay, but it didn't work well for Iran that got its nuclear facilities bombed. What do you make of where things stand right now?
I think what's really important about the president's plan and what I think is occurring with both Israel and Hamas stepping forward is that there would be this ceasefire, but the next step is that there would be a governance structure in place. What has always been missing with respect to Gaza is an opportunity for governance. And that's what the president is looking to, is for the future, where there could be an opportunity both for peace for the Palestinians and peace for Israel. That opportunity for governance, for a structure that can look to the future, I think is what really is the vision that both sides, I think, sees in the president's plan.
Okay, you are just back from Ukraine, and it sounds to me like you are more convinced than ever of the necessity for Congress to pass some very strict sanctions on Russia. And I want to talk about that proposal. But while you were there, Russia continued to try to expand the conflict into the rest of Europe as drones harass air travel in European capitals, and Russian aircraft brazenly enter NATO airspace. You worked with NATO, you're closely connected to all of this. What is going to happen there?
Well, what's important, what we're seeing is that because Ukraine has implemented such unbelievable innovation in their anti-drone technology and their air defenses, Russia is sort of bypassing Ukraine and is now testing the air defenses of the NATO countries. And we're seeing it in Romania, we're seeing it in the Baltics. And in those areas, they do not have the advanced technology that Ukraine has been able to develop. And so we're seeing the needs for that anti-drone, that air defense technology in those surrounding nations to be able to adapt to this new warfare that Russia is implementing in this drone technology. But what's really important about these sanctions is we're going to have to be able to impact the economy of Russia. Lindsey Graham's and Brian Fitzpatrick's bills in the House and the Senate gives us the ability to impact the production of munitions that is occurring in Russia that's allowing them to bombard, both with drones and traditional munitions, really the civilian population, the murderous aggression that Russia is doing to Ukraine. Our ability to impact, their ability to sell their oil, to sell energy, is the only way really to bring this to a head, to show that there is going to be a cost to Russia for continuing this murderous aggression.
So you mentioned Senator Graham. When I hear Senator Graham and other Republicans talk about the sanctions, it's about empowering President Trump to confront Russia. But I think the president already has the power if he wants to use it. Is this really more about pushing the president to take a harder line with Russia?
Well, the House has led before. The House led in the issue of even providing lethal weapons. You'll recall in the Obama administration, Poroshenko famously came to the House floor and said, "I can't win a war with blankets," where the Obama administration was only providing blankets. This really, I think, would be a strong statement of strong support for the House and the Senate for the president to take this step, which would send a strong signal to Russia that the president would have full support to do secondary sanctions against China, against India, against the EU and others that might buy Russian oil or Russian energy, knowing that Russia's economy is going to pay the price.
Okay, last thing. The administration notified members of Congress that the president has determined that a state of war exists between the United States and transnational drug cartels. That's to explain why he's ordered the Navy to kill suspected drug runners on the high seas. But when the administration asserts domestic authority against these gang members, it's on the grounds that they're an extension of the Venezuelan government. I am very confused. What in the world is going on here, and why isn't Congress more involved in this?
Well, Congress has begun to receive notifications from the administration, and we've begun to ask the questions as to give us the legal authority, the legal justification in which these actions are being taken. And we have not been receiving full descriptions or justifications. We've been receiving information about the intelligence that's being used to ascertain who is involved and the logistics, if you will, of what is occurring, but not really the full assessment of the legal justification of these. Congress is involved. Congress in classified sessions are beginning. We're asking these questions, and there are concerns on Capitol Hill. One thing is for certain, these cartels, the drug trades impact American lives and it impacts America. This is certainly very, very serious, both in the legal justifications, the legal issues that are involved, and of course, American lives. And Congress is involved.
Okay, America, if you were one of the fans who helped the Dayton Dragons minor league baseball team set the record for the longest stretch of sold-out home games, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Mike Turner.
Chris, thank you for that.
You bet, cool. You bet, you bet. Okay, with us now from Illinois, Democratic Congressman Jonathan Jackson. Congressman, look, I 100% understand how important health insurance is as an issue for voters and for Americans. I understand that the reason that Democrats outscore Republicans on the issue consistently is because of things like what Senate Democrats are doing right now. But as a tactic, I gotta say, government shutdowns have a pretty inglorious history. At least that's what these folks said once upon a time.
People in there discussed at what happened in terms of the shutdown of government. It's an unthinkable tactic to use.
This is playing with fire, and we are happy to negotiate. But we want to negotiate without a gun to our head.
In other words, they demanded ransom just for doing their job.
Okay, so what the heck in the heck? What's different this time?
Well, this one big ugly bill that was passed was done without any floor debate, and not one Democratic amendment was accepted. And so this is a natural check and balance. So it's gone through the lower part of the House, and now it's in the Senate, and this is where there's negotiation. Typically in this process of negotiations, the president would sit down with the leaders of both parties, of the upper and the lower house, and he's refused to do so. And these, I would say, inaccuracies or untruths, and more candidly, just simply outright lies by telling people that the Democrats are trying to get persons that are here undocumented benefits of the Medicaid system is simply a falsehood. It's not true. If you look at the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act of 1996, people that are here unlawfully cannot receive Medicaid.
Okay, if the Senate can broker a deal to get to 60 votes, that's likely, it seems like, that it will include at least a temporary extension of those COVID-era subsidies for Obamacare. But probably not what was in Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' ask, what Democrats really want here. So any Senate compromise is going to lose a bunch of Republican votes in the House. They don't like it. We were just talking to your colleague from Ohio about that. That means it will be on you and your caucus to get it done. How confident are you that that smaller version, if it comes back to the House, could get through with Democratic support?
Well, I think the president should also tell people what the world looks like after this bill goes into effect, into law, that how many hospitals will be closed, how many people will be kicked off of their affordability of these health care plans. 16 million people. We've all lived through a COVID era now, and we've seen hospitals full and overrun. We're a nation of almost 340 million people with less than 1 million hospital beds. We've seen measles outbreaks. Who knows what's going on with the Secretary of Health now under Mr. Kennedy. But there are fewer scientists that are at the helm under his leadership, and this is disaster. So you're looking at 16 million people out of the 80 million people that qualify for the Medicaid having to come off of the assistance. Now you're going to look at closures in hospitals right here in the state of Illinois. In my first district, there's 24,000 people that are coming off. Is this the America that we want, to make people more insecure, to see more illnesses that aren't treated? We have the money. It's a matter of priorities. He's done the tax breaks. That's the offset. And this is what's triggered this. He has put, at the same time, more tax breaks for the wealthiest 1% and has taken money away from the poorest people. Why is there a war going on against the poorest people in our country is the problem for the administration. And this is a Republican shutdown. The president refused to talk with the Democrats.
Congressman, speaking of Chicago, President Trump is sending at least 300 National Guard troops into your hometown. Your governor, J.B. Pritzker, calls it a constitutional crisis. The White House says these Guard members are just protecting immigration officers carrying out their duties. I bet there are probably a lot of Chicago Democrats, people in your district, and they're in the first, that might agree with Governor Pritzker and you on the constitutional merits here, but they're probably relieved to see the migrant crackdown in a city that struggled so much to deal with mass migration in recent years. What do you tell them, those folks who feel conflicted here?
Well, there's no conflict here. People are very upset and disgusted. This happened less than 1.5 miles from my house in South Shore. And to see helicopters overhead with ropes hanging out, with people coming down, kicking in doors, zip tying children. Some people came out of the apartment building naked, throwing in the tear gas, breaking down doors. This was a neighborhood that's 98% African American. To say that this is where illegal and gang infestation was taking place simply was not true. Also, American citizens got rounded up in that. American citizens had long barrel guns put in their face. Is that the country that we want? So no, he should talk with the governor. It's a matter of U.S. law. It's the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 that the president ought to abide by. You cannot use our military on our soil. This is breaking the law. And Republicans ought to speak up to this, because we all look like immigrants. Who looks like an immigrant? And why is this, very curiously, only targeting the black and brown communities?
Okay, Congressman, before I let you go, you're on the Agriculture Committee. President Trump says he wants to make row crops great again by sending a $10 billion subsidy to soybean farmers and others who are getting crushed in this ongoing trade war. Do you support relief for farmers? And what do you say about the suggestion the president doesn't need to come to Congress for the money and he can just redirect the tariff revenues?
He is breaking the law once again, and it's a disaster. This is only the first check that he would have to give to the farmers, and this is a self-inflicted wound. He sent $20 billion last week when he secured the Argentinian crops. At the same time in Argentina, they reduced their tariffs. They sent their soybeans to China. Our soybeans are now being harvested. They're going to rot. They're going to have to be fed to the hogs and other things here. He's reduced our market share, and he's put more tariffs on us. Now we're looking at $650, $620 to go a metric ton to send our agricultural soybean products into China. and the Brazilians are doing it at 550, which is a longer trade route.
I should have known not to ask.
Inept on the economy. I really
I
wish
should have
you
known
would
not
give me
to
some
ask.
time on
I
that.
know. I should never ask an Illinoisan about soybeans. It gets out of hand quickly. Congressman, we thank
And
you.
he's been a disaster.
I just stipulate for the record. Okay, if you knew that Bourbonnais was in Kankakee County, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Jonathan Jackson. We thank you. Appreciate you very much. Coming up, Washington is great at the blame game, including on the skyrocketing costs for health insurance in America. But why don't we get past the shutdown theater and dig into the data? One of America's leading healthcare experts, a man who served in both the Obama and Trump administrations, will help us out. Plus, we're going to head to our wonder wall to explain why those elections in New Jersey and Virginia are actually worth paying attention to and not just some more East Coast bias when the Hill Sunday returns. With the government shutdown, Obamacare is back in the news, just like much of the past 16 years. There's no doubt that the cost of insurance has gone up dramatically since the Affordable Care Act, even as the number of insured Americans has climbed and climbed and climbed. Okay, most Americans, you know, get their insurance through their jobs. According to a Kaiser Family Foundation report, family plan premiums went up 63% by 2022 and have kept climbing since then. But the biggest change with Obamacare, and you know this too, was that the expansion of Medicaid was made to include working class Americans. That was the big change. But the other big difference under Obamacare was the creation of what we call exchanges, so that insurers, the idea was, would compete to provide coverage for those without workplace health insurance. For those people, get this, premiums went up 75% in the first decade, and they are still rising. Now, if you ask a Republican, they will say this is all because of Obamacare. Of course, if you ask a Democrat, they will say it would have been much worse without Obamacare. So why don't we ask somebody who might give us a straight answer? David Shulkin served as Secretary of Veterans Affairs in the first Trump administration, and he was appointed to that job after serving as Undersecretary in the Obama administration. He's a renowned private sector hospital administrator who is credited with dramatic turnarounds at massive healthcare organizations. So it is perfect that he joins us now. Okay, which is it, Mr. Shulkin? Is it because of Obamacare or in spite of Obamacare?
You know, what's really clear is this healthcare system is broken, and the real issue is affordability. Americans are increasingly unable to afford the healthcare plans that they have. And the problem really is that since Obamacare, we've not had a look at national healthcare reform. And so this is a problem that, frankly, the Republicans have not proposed a plan that's going to make healthcare affordable, and the Democrats haven't proposed a comprehensive reform plan. What we see are continued Band-Aids, which are in the form of these subsidies, to try to make health care affordable, but it doesn't make it affordable for everybody. And clearly, without these subsidies, we're going to see a large number of new uninsured Americans starting in 2026.
Well, you have set up my next question and this graphic very perfectly. I was stunned to learn that there are almost 24 million Americans who are covered through these exchanges. I want you to take a look at the analysis from the Kaiser Family Foundation that forecasts what will happen to premiums if and when these subsidies expire. You see there that down in the right corner, middle-class beneficiaries over the age of 60, that's a monthly spike of $851. I get why Democrats chose this as their place to fight. But to your point, there's got to be something very wrong with the way the system is working, if that's even possible. What's the matter? What is the matter that these huge cost increases are going on? What's the problem?
Well, the problem is that the cost of healthcare, the cost of providing it, the cost of the pharmaceuticals, the cost of being hospitalized just continues to increase, and Americans essentially are getting sicker with the chronic illness that's out there. So without being able to provide preventative care, without being able to address the reasons for why chronic illness is essentially out of control, we're going to continue to see these healthcare cost increases. But what we do know is that if you take away healthcare, or if you force more people to lose their health care so they become uninsured, that not only delays the type of care that needs to happen to be able to get these costs under control, but it also raises the cost for the rest of Americans who do have insurance, because when young people or healthy people choose not to be insured, they leave the insurance pool, and those are the less sick people, so those that remain have higher costs to share. And so we're actually headed in the wrong direction. Rather than looking at comprehensive health reform, changing the model of healthcare in the United States, we're actually going to be increasing the costs, because uninsured essentially end up in hospitals, they end up in emergency rooms, and that cost is shared by everybody.
Dr. Shulkin, the last thing is some of this just because medicine has allowed us to live longer and people are older, and the most expensive time in your life for healthcare is when you are, the reason those premiums are so high over 60 is that there's just so much more medicine can do now than it could 40 years ago?
I wish that that was the case, and clearly over the last 40 years, that would not be inaccurate. You know, we've made great advances, but unfortunately, in the last couple of years, we've not seen that continued increase in life expectancy. In fact, we've seen a decrease, and this is because of, COVID-19. It's because of other illnesses. It's because of all of the pandemics that are at, all of the issues related to overdoses and substance abuse and mental health. And so we're actually beginning to see a decline in the life expectancy in the United States. And so just by adding on more costs doesn't mean that we're making improvements. This is really a time that we do need people to come and to sit down and to figure out a better way of delivering healthcare, a better way of pricing healthcare, including pharmaceuticals. And simply to make this into a political issue and have a government shutdown over it isn't going to get us to where we need to go. We need both sides talking about the real issues here to solve this for Americans.
Well, Dr. Shulkin, we thank you for doing that with us here today. You're a mensch. Okay, there is still much more ahead. Will Middle East peace be easier to achieve than getting Congress to agree on a spending deal? The cautious optimism surrounding the latest peace plan for Gaza. Our Best in the Business panel is next when The Hill Sunday returns. Welcome back. Lucky for you, America, we are now joined by our Best in the Business panel of journalists. Say hello to Bill Salmon. He is the Senior Vice President of Editorial Content for The Hill and NewsNation. That means he's my boss, so be nice to him. You should also be nice to Tia Mitchell. She's the Washington Bureau Chief for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She's our friend. And Jasmine Wright is White House correspondent for Notice. And say hello to Charles Lane. He is a columnist for the Free Press, and he is my colleague at the American Enterprise Institute. Chuck, you think and write about this stuff and have for a long time. And I'm reminded of our friend Charles Krauthammer's line when it came to Middle East peace processes. He would say, "Wake me when peace breaks out." Is peace about to break out?
Well, I guess Charles is right about many things. He's right about this as well, that if somebody comes to you and says it's time for a long peace in the Middle East, be skeptical. I do think, though, 2 years after October 7th, the war's logic on both sides has been exhausted. Yeah. And President Trump has managed to maneuver, somewhat through just sort of sheer force of bluff and personality, all the parties, including, very importantly, the Arab states around and Turkey and Qatar, to kind of force Hamas and Israel together. The big moment came when Israel bombed the Hamas people in Qatar. Yeah. And that freaked out the Qataris and got them to go to Trump to put pressure on Netanyahu to kind of cool things. And the next thing you know, Trump and his aides had Netanyahu maneuvered into kind of agreeing to a plan that's very favorable to him. It's kind of like a negotiated surrender for Hamas, not an unconditional one. And now we're waiting to see if Hamas is really going to be willing to play ball with that. But I'm optimistic. I think a lot of people in Israel are very optimistic about this. But yeah, Charles is right. Be skeptical.
Be skeptical. Okay. You know where else we like to be skeptical, Tia? We like to be skeptical about when Congress says that we'll never reopen the government. We don't care how long it takes. We'll never yield. We'll never bend. What's the TikTok? The House isn't even in session this week. So the House Republicans say you can go pound sand. We don't care what you do. What is really happening?
Well, honestly, not a lot. There's not a lot of negotiation right now between Republicans and Democrats, between the House and the Senate. Both sides right now are pretty dug in, where Republicans are saying the House has a bill, they passed it. Senate Democrats help get the bill passed in the Senate because it needs 60 votes because of the filibuster. Democrats are saying, nope, we want a new deal. And if you don't want to take our bill, which cannot pass in the Senate, help us negotiate a new one. And neither side is wavering from that yet. I think if the polling continues to show that Democrats are faring okay under the shutdown, that leaves little incentive for Democrats to bend. And then, quite frankly, Trump in Trump's White House not wanting these Medicaid cuts, not wanting to spend additional funding, doesn't give really any benefit for Republicans to bend. So that's where we are right now. If Trump changes or if public sentiment changes, then maybe one side will start to
like Clubber Lang in Rocky II. The forecast, my prediction is pain. Okay, Jasmine. Trump wants us to think, and I believe him, that he's enjoying this, that he likes this. They're posting videos of him as the Grim Reaper, and that he and Russ Vought are going to fire everybody, and that he can do so much more. I get Tia's point about where Democrats are, but if Donald Trump keeps going around and saying, keep it shut down, I can shut down, there's more government I want to shut down, they're gonna cave on this, right?
Democrats are going to cave? I'm not sure. I mean, I think you're going to see two pressure points in the next few days. October 10th is when federal workers would miss their first paycheck. Obviously, that's going to put additional pressure on Democrats. And then October 15th is when military members would miss their first check, obviously creating a lot of pressure on Democrats, potentially to cave. But I think you hit the nail right there. The President Trump has said the quiet part out loud, which is that there is an opportunity in this for him in the White House. They see it. Now, they call it an unfortunate opportunity, but they still say it's an opportunity to reshape the federal government in the way that Russ Vought has always wanted to and has studied. And so, obviously, they have threatened to do those reduction in forces, layoffs that haven't been done in a shutdown before, kind of setting a new precedent if they go through with it. They've cut off money in Democratic states for certain energy projects and not cut off the same money in Republican states for certain. So the White House wants to make this as painful as possible to dial up the heat on Democrats and get them to cave. But right now, Democrats, for better or worse, are seeming like they're kind of a united bloc rowing in the same fashion.
Bill Salmon, if the White House gets its way, right, and they get to shut down a bunch of stuff, and Democrats are break and they run and they do a clean CR and they do, let's say they got everything that they wanted. Look at these numbers from the Kaiser Family Foundation. Should Congress extend the enhanced tax credits? 92% of Democrats say that. Among MAGA Republicans, 57% say they should be extended, 70% of just ordinary Republicans, and 82% of independents want the Obamacare subsidies extended. Who deserves the blame, Kaiser asked, if the tax credits aren't extended? 39% said President Trump, 37% said Republicans in general. So short term, the Democrats are in a real pickle, but long term, Republicans have a problem here, right?
Well, I think short term, look, right now the optics favor the Democrats. These subsidies are popular, as these polls show. But as we get to October 10th and October 15th and the paychecks start to not materialize, I think the pressure could start to shift in a more favorable direction for Republicans, because it becomes less about really an unrelated matter, the extension of these ACA health subsidies, than it does about opening the government. So if that happens and the numbers start to shift, I think it's even more advantageous. You talked about Democrats eventually caving. I think they will. And in the meantime, as you pointed out, what damage can Republicans do long-term damage from
next year? But next year. in the midterms, the Republicans do have a problem. They have exposure on this healthcare stuff, right?
Yes, they do. Yes. And by the way, this is a short-term extension of the government for what? I don't know how many weeks, but we're going to be right back at this. Let's just say it gets passed.
Why are you bumming us out? You're bumming us out.
I mean, to your point, though, I've asked the White House, will President Trump basically take on the responsibility of being the president in which these subsidies go up? And they tell me that it is different between the politics of right now and the policy of right now, but the policy is what could come back to bite them at the end.
All right, we're getting into very rank punditry when we come back. I promise. We're taking it deep. No beards, no beer bellies, or no service. That's the Hegseth way when the Hill Sunday returns.
Every weeknight on NewsNation, Blake Berman brings you the biggest stories from the top newsmakers in Washington.
How does this end?
For now, I think that Democrats are in a strong position.
Linda is right, but I will say this. They have a microphone, but what are they talking about?
I don't think it's winning or losing politically.
NewsNation's The Hill, weeknights at 6, 5 Central. News for all Americans.
There are 9.5 million residents of New Jersey and 8.8 million residents of Virginia. But if you're among the other 320 million Americans who don't live in either of those places, why should you care about the gubernatorial elections taking place there 1 month from today? Let me explain. These off-year contests are a proving ground for midterm messaging and take the temperature of swing voters. Ding! In an average of polls, President Trump has an approval rating nationally of 41%. In a new Virginia poll, ta-da, he's at 42%. In New Jersey, you guessed it, 42%. Nothing matters as much as presidential job approval in midterms, so this is a very good test a year out. Now, take that 42% in Virginia. What else is at 42% in the new poll that was just conducted for the Hill? That's the percentage of the vote, there she is, that Republican Winsome Earl Sears is getting against Democrat Abigail Spanberger, who is rocking a 10-point lead in that poll. Now look at New Jersey, where in a new poll for Fox News, Republican Jack Ciattarelli got, that's right, 42, you're noticing a trend here, 42%, also identical to Trump's national approval. But unlike Spanberger, New Jersey Democrat Mikey Sherrill has had trouble breaking away. She can't get that distance. In an average of recent polls, Sherrill leads by 5.3 points, almost half of Spanberger's average over a similar period down in Virginia. Now we know that there will be some voters who don't like Trump but will vote Republican at the state level. And we know that late deciders could flip these races. But the Republicans in these races definitely know that they're behind. That's why the races are getting ugly, with Ciattarelli trying to wreck Sherrill's Navy service record by bringing up a 31-year-old cheating scandal at Annapolis. I don't know. But in Virginia, it's an attack line Democrats will remember very well.
And if a child secretly identifies as transgender at school, she says the parents shouldn't be told. That's insane. Spanberger is for they, them, not for us.
Our best in the business panel with us even now, Bill Salmon. We talked about this on our little whole hog dippity doodle thing that we do on Fridays. It was that I enjoyed talking about. But since then, when we talked about how hard it is for Democrats to figure out an answer that works with swing voters on trans women in sports, we have a new scandal in Virginia, which is that the candidate for Attorney General sent a bunch of psycho texts to a Republican member, a Republican colleague in the House about wanting to see the House Speaker's children die so that they will feel the pain and change their whatever. How fluid do you think this race is?
Well, it presents a problem on a number of levels for Democrats. First of all, Jay Jones is the guy that sent these texts. He was favored to win the Attorney General's race by 30 or 40 points.
No way.
I think originally, I think it's now a coin toss, and if this thing gets legs and continues to be a controversy over the next month, he could lose that race. So it's a problem for him. It's a problem for Abigail Spanberger, who, this is part of the sort of her ticket.
Yeah.
So this is a hard.
She torched him right away, though.
But it's also a problem for Democrats nationally, because remember, even though he wrote these texts a few years ago, they're coming to light now in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination. So it fairly or unfairly reinforces the Republican narrative that Democrats are becoming the party of political violence.
Okay. Chuck, what do you think the generals who were flown from around the world. All of these generals and all of these admirals were flown from around the globe to come and listen to Pete Hegseth plug his book, talk about his fitness regime, listen to Donald Trump talk about the enemy within. Panning across that crowd, it was a somber group. What do you think they were thinking?
I think they were thinking, I came all the way for this, to hear a lecture on grooming and being overweight, and to sort of see Pete Hegseth strut literally his stuff in front of a gigantic patent-like U.S. flag. I got work to do back at the base. There's a lot of talk about we're the Department of War and fighting wars. Well, this is a distraction from that. I suspect they were very disgruntled, but they are so disciplined that they sat there and took it. Footnote, he was complaining, the secretary was, about the terribly corrupt and manipulated promotion process that they have at the Pentagon. Every single one of those people in that audience was a product of that promotion process.
Okay, Jasmine, the president in that speech talked about the enemy within and the radical left and the da-da-da, and the defenders of the administration will tell you they're not doing it. They're not doing those things yet. They're not using the regular military. They're sending National Guard troops in to protect ICE offices in Portland or in Chicago, and the courts are actually stopping this from happening, and that people shouldn't pay attention to the rhetoric. They should pay attention to what's going on. Democrats don't exactly know how to engage on this front because it's the old trap of Trump, right? If you overreact, you sound hysterical. But if you're actually nervous, you got to say something. Are they flummoxed?
Yeah, well, Democrats often, we know, struggle with the idea of crime and immigration, and what this White House has been very good at is kind of intermingling the two. Obviously, Donald Trump has talked at length about making American cities great again by trying to stop crime, and now we're seeing the National Guard go into, or be called up to be deployed into Chicago to kind of do a perimeter around these federal buildings, ICE agents, as we saw in Los Angeles, but still this idea of like they could be impacting crime, even if they're not directly related to it. And so I think Democrats largely nationally kind of struggle with this issue, but what we are seeing is these local municipalities, from governors to city mayors to attorney generals in those states, try to figure out a way to push back on this administration. Obviously, we saw the latest time in Portland when that judge last night put an injunction on deploying the National Guard there. I think that we could probably see something similar in Chicago and Illinois, as they have promised to try to sue for the administration's actions.
See, Congresswoman-elect Grijalva from Arizona is waiting in the wings to be sworn in to Congress. Now, she would raise the bar for what Republicans need to pass legislation, but she would also be the final signatory on a discharge petition to release the Epstein files. This is something that the House Speaker has not wanted to do, and they have not. One of the reasons that they're glad not to be in session this week is that as soon as they go into regular session, they're going to have to swear in. Democrats are still, they're still locked in on Epstein throughout this whole thing. Yeah. Will somebody take their name off that? Do you think some Republican will take their name off that rather than embarrass the administration and the Speaker?
There has been immense pressure on the handful of Republicans who have signed the discharge petition, but so far, not only have they said they will not cave to that pressure, but they have taken umbrage, said, how dare you come to me and say that I'm wrong for signing a petition.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is not afraid.
She is not afraid, and we know Thomas Massie isn't afraid. The other Republicans are women who said they're standing up for the women who are the Epstein victims. I just want to point out, though, that there are some who believe that the reason why the House is canceling, one of the reasons, a subtext to the reason why House Speaker Johnson has canceled votes, is because that helps him delay swearing in that new member.
All right.
But he could have during the pro forma.
Did you like all that, America? If you did, why not sign up for Whole Hog Politics? You get the email in your inbox every Friday, and then you can join Bill and me for our video chat every week, so just scan the QR code. This is your Almanac for today, Sunday, October 5th, 2025. Happy birthday, Chester A. Arthur. On this day in 1829, America's 21st president was born. You may remember him for having two first names or for those magnificent sideburns. But what you ought to remember about Chester Arthur is a story of unlikely redemption. The dapper Arthur was forced onto the Republican ticket in 1880 as running mate to James A. Garfield, a sop to the enthusiastically corrupt Spoils faction led by James G. Blaine. They were outraged over Garfield's commitment to civil service reform and ending political patronage. Arthur, who had presided over rampant corruption as the collector of tariffs at the Port of New York, was thought to be a patsy for the wildly corrupt Senator Roscoe Conkling, a stalwart for the Old Boys Network. But only 120 days into his tenure as vice president, disaster struck. Garfield was murdered by a deranged office seeker as the president waited for a train. The dandy who had been sneered at as elegant Arthur was catapulted to the presidency, and the Spoils faction was ecstatic. But because of the public outcry over the motivations for the murder of the beloved young president, and because of Garfield's sterling example, Arthur turned his back on Conkling and the corrupt gang. Indeed, history will remember Arthur as the president who signed the landmark 1883 Pendleton Act that established a merit-based hiring system in the civil service system as we know it. So whatever spoils this week brings your way, we hope they're gilded. Until next time.